If you have any dignity, apologize to the
podcast. Hello, everybody. Welcome to Apologize to the podcast where me and a few of my friends geek out about movies and video games and anime and all sorts of random stuff. Maybe even one day, books. But my name's Tyler.
We got to start with Das Capital.
Das Capital.
Das Capital.
Das Capital. Oh no, we'll have a pretentious episode. But I'm Tyler. I go by Jowlman22, and with me is...
It's me, AJ, from the Don't Ignore Me YouTube channel.
Yes.
For $19.99, you can buy the... Okay, I don't know where I'm going with that.
He's selling something. Check on, Craigslist or something for him. Well, anyway, we're coming back after a spooky Halloween with some, I don't know, what's so special about November other than Thanksgiving? Nothing, just more fall.
Yeah, definitely more fall, and Thanksgiving is always good, and it's also crunch time for my fun academic stuff that I just love.
Academia is not fun at all, but one thing that has been interesting about November is whenever there's a new Bond movie, it usually comes out in November, which is kind of fitting because as we record this, the new Bond movie Spectre is out in theaters. We saw the movie, enjoyed it, and
we saw it just yesterday, as a matter of fact.
Yeah, so I don't really want to go into spoiled territories. I want to give the movie a little bit room to breathe and maybe do like a 4-part episode.
I'm going to spoil it right now.
Yes.
James Bond has no lines in this movie.
Oh. I think you watched the wrong movie. He does have alcoholic problems.
Oh yeah, it's as I saw in the review by The Onion, the very informative review. The movie is really a character study about one man's struggle with alcohol addiction.
I mean, I can kind of believe that, but you'd have to go and watch the movie. But I feel like it wouldn't be fair since we haven't really talked about the Daniel Craig movies to go straight into an episode on Spectre. So we'll definitely have to go back to those. But I'm thinking of a 4-part episode where we look at all Daniel Craig films. But
although to be honest, I did petition you to try to do more Daniel Craig for today, but it's okay. You convinced me to do the movie we are doing, which is
the movie's Living Daylights. But speaking of one thing that's interesting about the Daniel Craig movies is some can say they're a little too serious, they're very convoluted, which brings us to this movie, The Living Daylights, the first film with I'm kind of looking around to make sure no one's throwing any movie police bricks at me. But my favorite James Bond actor is actually Timothy Dalton. Part of that is he's made 2 very, very good movies, kind of rough around the edges, but he only did the 2, and they're both great, unlike some other Bond actors that kind of went on way past their prime. Roger Moore. And I do like me some Roger Moore every once in a while, but, what can you do? So I think Living Daylights is a very, very fitting movie to talk about Bond because it's very similar to some of the newer movies with, multiple layers of plot and, kind of a more developed story. It also has some problems, which we'll get to. So I'm looking forward to watching this. And, another thing said about the new Bond movies is they're supposed to be closer to the source material, the actual Ian Fleming books, by having more references to Bond books than the other movies have. Bringing that up, I think Timothy Dalton is the closest to James Bond from the actual books. I've only read the 2 so far, Casino Royale and Live and Let Die. But so far from what I've read of the James Bond books, the closest to the character on the page is Timothy Dalton's portrayal. So we're going to go and have us a little break real fast. And we're going to come back and watch The Living Daylights, and we'll give back our feedback after this commercial break.
Apologize to the podcast. We'll be right back.
And we are back, and we just watched The Living Daylights with a theme song by Aha, the people who brought Take On Me. And,
Aha!
I don't think that's a good choice for a song. A good choice for a group, because in the previous movie, A View to a Kill, they used Duran Duran, and that was a huge song in a lukewarm movie, and this was a lukewarm song and a pretty awesome movie, in my opinion. So, we're all ready to geek out about Bond. I got my thing of sweet tea with lemon, so let's start this bad boy. Well,
Did you shake the lemon?
I did shake the lemon. It has a lemon peel in there too.
Whoa.
It's not very dry. It's just sweet. Very sweet. But aside from really bad martini jokes, what did you think of The Living Daylights?
It knocked the living daylights out of me, that's for sure.
That was really dry. Like a martini, hi. I guess going into plot synopsis, pretty much the movie begins with, cold open, which is typical for every James Bond movie. Starts off with a MI6 training mission where 300 agents are going for a training assignment to, see if they're up to speed and in physical shape. And there's actually an assassin let loose who is killing these 00 agents using Smirnum, which I do not speak Russian, so I'll probably be mispronouncing anything that sounds Russian, which is supposed to mean death to spies. And James Bond bumps into him, kills him, and it leads them to this big convoluted plot with a defecting Russian general who personally requested James Bond to protect him because he's afraid that someone from the KGB is going to assassinate him, and they think it's going to be this cello woman, this beautiful blonde woman who plays a cello, who happens to be the sniper, but because of Bond's instinct and taste for women, he decides to not kill her and just shoot the rifle out of her hand. So the British general is named Yorgi, and he is defecting to MI6 in London and trying to spoil all the surprises about Russia. And of course, he's naming a General, Koskov as the madman behind all this, who is now resorting to Stalin-like tactics of killing rival spies and taking lots of powers and becoming a complete psychotic. So one convoluted plot point leads to another, and we get a crazy American named Brad Whitaker, played by everyone's favorite Mitchell. Joe Don Baker. Mitchell. His mother never loved him. Oh, look, beer. And also we get some more shenanigans. So, I don't really want to dive too much into the plot, but this is probably the most...
It's a pretty windy plot.
Yeah, this is probably the most complicated and convoluted plot since From Russia with Love. I'd say maybe For Your Eyes Only, but that movie was a tiny bit more simpler. This one has, I'd say 2 main villains and lots of intrigue and, false twists and red herrings and lots of cool stuff. So I guess before we dive into the movie, I know that was kind of a vague plot summary, but pretty much...
Well, James Bond movies, they tend to go in many different directions, so it's kind of hard. It's kind of like, well, then this happened, and then this happened,
yeah,
and now we're halfway across the world, and now we're back,
and we're in Tangier.
I mean, yeah, this movie goes from like Austria to Tangier, which is in Morocco, to Afghanistan.
Austria, and
I did say Austria.
Well, they go back to Austria and Czechoslovakia, Afghanistan, and at one point they're in England because there's a safe house. But to try not to sell the plot short, it really does go a lot of crazy places. But pretty much to summarize, you just need to know that there's a defector who's not what he seems, and a cellist who's not what she seems. And because of this,
James Bond,
and then James
who's exactly
Bond,
what he seems,
who is, well, actually the closest to the books we've got in a long time with Mr. Timothy Dalton. We'll go into some of
or as I like to call him, Timmy D.
Timmy D.
Timmy D. Doesn't everyone call him that?
I think they call him Mr. Dalton because they will, I don't know, he'll smack you or something.
I think if I ever meet him, I'll try and call him Timmy D.
Oh man, I'd love to meet Timothy Dalton. He's awesome.
Yo, Timmy D, what's up, my Bond man? He's giving me the evil look right now.
I don't even know what to say about that. Anyway, but I guess before we dive into like what we liked, what we disliked, some behind the scenes stuff and some trivia. This was up until Casino Royale, this was the last Bond movie with a title tied into the original Ian Fleming series of books. Living Daylights is actually the title of one of the short stories, and there's a couple different collections of Ian Fleming's short stories that involve James Bond. One of the more popular ones is just called Octopussy and The Living Daylights, which is those two books. And then there's also the completed short stories and a couple other editions like that. But, you know, it's fairly easy to find. I don't own a copy of it, but I tend to, you know, buy it and read it at some point. But Living Daylights, from the plot synopsis I've read, is pretty much the whole short story is just the sniper story at the beginning.
Oh,
with
really?
With Bond and a female sniper named Trigger. Of course, the cellist in this movie is not named Trigger. That would be really funny. Named after Roy Rogers' horse.
What a beautifully sexy womanly name like Trigger.
So, but yeah, this was the last Bond movie up until Casino Royale to use a title of one of the source books, at least from the initial Ian Fleming group.
Yeah. Part of me actually kind of is surprised by that because I don't know, Living Daylights, the Living Daylights. I don't know. That doesn't really sound like a. I mean, I guess it kind of sounds like a James Bond movie name, mainly because it is a James Bond movie name. But for some reason, it just doesn't.
Doesn't seem like a very fitting title, like Live and Let Die or
yeah,
Goldfinger, or it's just kind of a very vague title.
Plus, I don't really know how it even applies to the movie. I mean, I know he says it once.
Yeah,
but...
he scared the living daylights out of her when he shoots the sniper rifle out of her hands.
Yeah, but other than that, I don't really know how else it applies.
That is a good point. I for a while I didn't know how Quantum of Solace fit that movie, but I gave up on that one.
Well, at least, I mean, the last movie we reviewed, James Bond movie we reviewed, it was pretty obvious because it was The Man with the Golden Gun.
Oh, that theme song. Why Lulu? No, I mean, The Man with the Golden Gun.
But I mean, he actually had a golden gun,
yeah,
so...
That one was fairly obvious because it was, you know...
Christopher Lee and his golden gun. But now The Living Daylights, I don't know.
Yeah, it's a very vague title, but, so that. Also, this was the first Bond movie with a new Bond actor since Live and Let Die, because this was the previous movie, View to a Kill, was Roger Moore's swan song. Pretty much he kind of didn't like the level of violence that the series is going in, and he just felt he was too old. I mean, he had been trying to leave since Moonraker, and he, you know, just kept being looped back. So this was a very interesting movie because it was also the first time we got a, you know, it was not the first time, but it was the first Bond movie in a while where we got a different Bond actor. And
that's right.
So that leads to who they ended up picking, which was Timothy Dalton.
Timmy D.
Timothy Dalton was originally offered the role and auditioned for Bond way back in On Her Majesty's Secret Service when Sean Connery said he was not going to return to play Bond after You Only Live Twice. And, you know, he pretty much declined the offer to be Bond because he felt he was too young. Which, you know, at the time...
In some ways that feels kind of stupid because if I was offered to play Bond right now, I'd be like, heck yeah.
Well, yeah, well, that's yeah. Oh, yeah, I mean, it'd be the chance of a lifetime, but... He was in his 20s. I don't know the exact year. I need to, you know, check my sources. But
he was born in the 40s, maybe. I don't know when he was born.
Anyway, but he was in his 20s when On Her Majesty's Secret Service was being made. So he left saying he was too young, and that movie ended up being cast with George Lazenby, which we saw what happened with that. And then, of course, he was offered to come and be Bond for Diamonds Are Forever. He declined. And they even offered it to him when it came time for Your Eyes Only, and Octopussy, and A View to a Kill. But he had prior engagements that kept him from being Bond. And what's interesting, though, is before Timothy Dalton landed the role, there's two other actors that were kind of in the running to be Bond. On the DVD, they even have one of the screen tests I don't have the Bond 50 Blu-ray box set, unfortunately. Wah, wah, wah. But Sam Neill, who everyone remembers as Alan from the Jurassic Park movies, he actually
is he British?
No, he's Australian.
Oh, close enough.
He would have been I think he would have been a really interesting Bond actor, which is cool because I mean George Lazenby's Australian. I think I'm pretty sure he's the only no.
Well,
I was gonna say non-British actor, but Sean Connery's Scottish. So
true. Well, I mean, as long as the actor's under the general protectorate of the Queen's land, it doesn't really matter.
Yeah, because Australia was a penal colony, so it's kind of connected.
Yeah. Well, no, I mean it's still part of the Commonwealth. The governments of Great Britain and Canada and Australia, they're all tied together loosely, but they're still tied together. And technically, I'm pretty sure the Queen technically still owns Australia, in the strictly ceremonial, semi-legal terms.
Mm-hmm. Which makes sense. So that means all we need now is like a Canadian and an Irish Bond actors. But I don't know about Irish. That might be a little awkward. Ooh. Anyway, so getting back onto the cast stuff. So, you have Sam Neill, who would have been a good Bond, but he kind of looks, he looked really convincing in the screen test. And then, of course, the most obvious one, and who would later become Bond in the 90s, Pierce Brosnan.
Cool. And
Pierce Brosnan was an actor they had been pursuing for a long time, and just things kept popping up, and the biggest thing that popped up was the TV show Remington Steele. And what's kind of sad, I didn't realize until I was looking up on IMDb, but apparently Remington Steele really did shaft the James Bond franchise, because they were so close to signing Pierce Brosnan. And I didn't realize it was this close, but they were getting ready to cancel Remington Steele, so Pierce Brosnan was auditioning for the role, and they were getting ready to cast him, and then they pretty much brought back Remington Steele for another season, so he had to go and film the show because of a contract. So the role then went to Timothy Dalton, but the irony is, the season that they filmed of Remington Steele ended up getting canceled after 6 episodes. So not even a full season. So we were this close. We were very close to having Pierce Brosnan.
Well, I suppose it works out for the best, since he eventually got to be Bond anyway. So
yeah, and that's the thing. I really do like Timothy Dalton. He's been in a lot of other good movies. Of course, I really like him in Hot Fuzz as one of the bad guys. He's in another fun comedy where he's kind of spoofing his spy character with, the character of Donald Drake in the Looney Tunes movie, Looney Tunes Back in Action, which is a movie that kind of gets overshadowed by Space Jam. I don't know. Have you seen both of those?
I believe I have, but it's been way too long for pretty much both of them. And though I've seen Space Jam more than once, I think I've only seen Looney Tunes Back in Action once, when it was almost new. So that would have been 10 years ago, I think.
Yeah, I like Looney Tunes Back in Action way better. Space Jam is really, really dated and not a good way. And plus, I don't really like sports, so having your main character be Michael Jordan doesn't really do anything for me.
Not to mention the bunny boobies.
The bunny boobies with the Jessica.
Not Jessica. Rabbit.
That would have been some good bunny boobies. Oh, hello. I'm thinking of Who Framed Roger Rabbit. But, oh wow! Rabbit. I never thought that talking about Living Daylights we'd be talking about Space Jam.
Yeah, where are we going with this podcast now?
Anyway,
next we're going to be talking about Gamera or something.
We should talk about Gamera, the super monster. But anyway, so Timothy Dalton is Bond in this film. Also at the cast we have
Joe Don Baker.
Joe Don Baker, who is a very interesting Bond villain. He's pretty much this really just hyper man-child
obsessed with war.
Who's obsessed with war, and he thinks he's this great general, and it turns out he's really just a a simpleton who cheats at, apparently never even served in any armed combat, and he's just this big phony guy. He plays with his little models and redoes battles and reconstructs battles the way he would have fought them. All these different historical battles,
What
like
a
Gettysburg.
nerd.
Yeah, like, I mean, I've heard of military, like, nuts, but that he's taking it to a new level.
Although I've actually kind of met someone similar to that, because I had a class that was literally all about war. And my professor, like, she designed it, and she was like basically obsessed with war, and she's like, oh, there's this and this reads Sun Tzu and like the Art of War, and it's anyway. That's another sidetrack, but it was kind of funny. So I've actually met someone with a kind of similar personality about war, but she's not quite as cartoonish as Jodan Baker, but
Well, I would say that he's to a very odd level, and of course his motivations are really weird because he's trying to buy arms, and he has all these new high-tech weapons, which kind of looks silly because one of them's like this plated glass machine gun that he carries.
Yeah, that almost looked like something out of a '60s sci-fi movie or something.
Yeah, it looked really just bizarre. So I mean, with Jodan Baker, of course, I mean, I'll always remember him for Mystery Science Theater for a couple movies,
Mitchell.
like Final Justice, and of course the big one, Mitchell. Mitchell is just one of those just unsung hero movies. Just God. I love Mitchell. I need to get the uncut version because apparently there's like a huge subplot that's completely cut out of the Mystery Science Theater. The Mystery Science Theater 3000 episode. I got tongue-tied there. For pacing, to kind of condense it for the format, for commercial breaks. But apparently there was a bunch of subplots that were just kind of cut out of Mitchell. And of course, Jodan Baker was in Walking Tall. Before it was remade with, Dwayne Johnson, The Rock, and he was in a bunch of other, I call them like Southern fried movies, exploitation movies about the South, and he was also in a movie called The Outfit with Robert Duvall, and he was in 2 more James Bond movies playing a different character, which is kind of always confusing with the James Bond movies where they recast people as different characters. But he's in 2 of the Pierce Brosnan movies. He's in GoldenEye and Tomorrow Never Dies as a CIA guy who kind of helps out Bond, even though they could have just got Felix Leiter, but he's just this random guy who kind of bails out James Bond randomly in those 2 movies. Kind of like how Charles Gray was an informant who gets killed and You Only Live Twice, and then he plays Blofeld in Diamonds Are Forever. Just one of those weird, like, I recognize that face, and he was just in 2 movies.
Yeah.
So you got him. Also, talking about the cast, John Rhys-Davies plays Colonel Pushkin.
John Rhys-Davies.
And, of course, we all remember him from, lots of different roles, especially the Indiana Jones films.
Yeah. And he was in Lord of the Rings, and he was also in the video game Ripper. Ooh. Which also co-stars Christopher Walken, and it's that's
the one with the live action segments, right?
Yeah, and it's also funny though because a small side story. I actually got to meet John Rhys-Davies at a convention, but the funny thing is that like I'm not familiar with all his filmography, and I knew he was in Lord of the Rings and blah blah blah, but I'm not really a big Lord of the Rings fan anyway. But I ended up asking him about the Ripper game. I'm like, how do you feel? I mean, how did you feel in the '90s being in live action video games? Like, that's kind of different from movies. And he just kind of gave a stock answer. I wasn't even sure if he was. I'm not even sure he understood my question or if he even remembered being in that video game. But I just wanted to ask him about that because I'm sure he's probably never gotten that brought up since he's famous for much better things. But still, it's funny.
I'd say Indiana Jones is more famous than Ripper, but
I know that's what I'm saying. He's famous for much better things.
He was probably going, ask me about Harrison Ford. Now I might butch up this name, but of course, with the Bond girl, pretty much a staple of the James Bond films is the Bond girls. Some movies drop the ball, and some have a great cast, and some are mixed. I think the Bond girl in this movie was was really well done, and I'm gonna totally mispronounce her name, but I'm gonna try. But playing the role of Kara is Mariam D'Ado.
You want me to try it?
Yeah.
Oh dear. Mariam D'Abo.
Diabo. And especially lately, she's done a lot of like documentaries and interview bits about the Bond series. She actually did one called Bond Girls Are Forever, where she made a it was pretty much just a documentary talking about the Bond girl phenomenon, because the Bond films kind of border on being like romantic and sexist, and it was a really fun documentary, just like, yeah, girl power, and Bond's even more remembered for his co-stars and his romantic interests.
I think this one small thing about this movie is that it's I think it's probably one of the few James Bond movies where he doesn't sleep. He only sleeps with one woman, or he's only interested in one woman.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I mean, he kind of flirts with the two girls who Felix Leiter.
Oh yeah.
Who
I'm sure he would have slept with them if he had the chance, but
yeah, there's a scene where he's in Tangier and he's escaping this not to spoil too much if you haven't seen it.
Sorry, that was me.
But yes, Gesundheit. Anyway, but there's a scene where he's in Tangier and he's escaped this phony assassination attempt, and he pops in the car with these two beautiful women, and it turns out they work for Felix Leiter. But he flirts around, but that's actually a good point you bring up, because this was one of the first Bond movies that came out during the AIDS scare. This was that, and of course women's rights and stuff. They were trying to rise of feminism, but this was also during the AIDS scare, so they were kind of stripping Bond of his playboy tendencies and trying to make him more romantic and focused just on one woman, which is good, because this is probably one of the most romantic Bond movies, right up there with On Her Majesty's Secret Service and From Russia with Love, where it's so focused on their chemistry and their interplay, and the drama is all about them, because he starts falling for her, and then she feels betrayed, and she regains the trust, and she's the one who actually goes and tries to rescue Bond.
Yeah.
What did you think of her character, Kara?
Yeah, I think she was a good Bond girl. She had interesting things to do, and she stood up for herself. She went into battle with the Mujahideen late in the movie.
Well, which we'll get to that here in a little bit.
Yeah. But she was a good character. She was a good, well-rounded character. Probably, I guess. I haven't seen all the Bond movies, but I think she's definitely a good Bond girl. One of the higher ups in the hierarchy of Bond girls, if you want to say it like that.
Yeah, they did have good chemistry, and I think it has a lot to do with Timothy Dalton. If this would have been like a Roger Moore movie, oh Lord, their relationship would have been completely different. There's a warmness there, and she's an interesting character.
It's a step up from Grace Jones for sure.
Yep. Oh God, Lord.
Sorry.
Hello.
I love you, Grace Jones, but
or Tanya Roberts. Oh man. Oh, Tanya Roberts. Oh. Anyway, she has to be one of the worst Bond girls, but we'll get to A View to a Kill one day. But no, with Kara, she's a very interesting character, because she starts out kind of naive, and she's this very sweet girl, but when you first meet her, you think she's an assassin, because she's this mysterious cello player, and she's got a lot of different layers to her. Goes from assassin to this naive lover, to falling for Bond, and getting mad. She's not really a damsel in distress, because she does take action, but she's not really a warrior type, so she's competent, and she can handle herself in a situation. So that's good than it just being like a damsel in distress who's like, oh no, I broke a nail, Bond, save me. Because, I mean, yeah, you're running around with, I guess you could say modern day would be the Taliban. So continuing with the cast, I'll probably butcher their name. Well, Art Malak, I'm kind of hopping around. What's interesting about him is he plays the leader of the Mujahideen. And, he's just, he's a good actor. But what a weird connection this is to some other action movies is he plays pretty much the same role, just evil, in True Lies, the James Cameron Arnold Schwarzenegger spy comedy with Jamie Lee Curtis and all of them. And he's pretty much playing the exact same character minus facial hair and just being evil. So that's always cool. And I guess since we were talking about him, talking about Yorgi, played by Jordan Crab?
Jerion Crab.
Jerion Crab?
I guess.
Okay. And of course, I'm going to mispronounce their name, but Jerion Crab plays, or Krub, plays Yorgi. And he's a really fun actor. He's been in a lot of other kind of European action movies. Off the top of my head, I remember him being like this prime minister type character in Transporter 3. Not a very good movie. I like the first two Transporter films. You can tell why they kind of rebooted it already. But he's a very unusual Bond villain. Because, I mean, I would consider him probably the main villain a lot more than Whitaker, because he's more connected to the plot, and Whitaker's almost a side villain who's kind of connected, because he's very manipulative, he's sinister, and he's also kind of funny, because even when he's being sinister, he'll mess up and he'll show like a goofy reaction from him. So he's a very interesting Bond villain. So adding to that, I guess before we talk more about the villains, also with the cast as Necros, the Austrian assassin, is Andreas Newski. Oh man, I'm gonna offend a lot of people. He was also in Die Hard and Mission Impossible, so he's a really cool like Austrian actor. Says he was born in West Berlin, West Germany. So yay! Thank you, IMDb. So anywho, so that kind of covers the big stuff about the cast. So I guess we'll move on to the actual talking about the good, the bad. Do you want to hit up the good or the bad first? So what did you enjoy about The Living Daylights, AJ?
Yeah, well, I liked a lot of the movie. I thought it went to many interesting places. I like Timothy Dalton a lot. This is my first. I mean, he was only in 2 Bonds, but I liked it. This is my first time seeing him in a Bond movie. But I liked him. And I thought he fit the bill very well. Mm-hmm. And he was definitely, he had a good mix of like cunning and action oriented Bond, but also just like I really you could tell he's really good at what he does. And very resourceful, getting out of the situations with, which is what he does in every movie, but still. So yeah, overall I thought he was good. And overall I like the plot a lot, mainly because of I like the whole Cold War dynamic, the whole kind of Russian subplot. I mean, there was a lot of kind of geopolitics of the late 80s with the Russians and Afghanistan, and like being in Czechoslovakia and these kind of things, because I don't know, I think it's kind of interesting seeing the Soviet Union portrayed in film, and obviously they're still kind of the bad guys, but they're not one-dimensional bad guys, because you have John Rhys-Davies who isn't seen in a entirely negative light, so
yeah,
stuff like that.
Well, I mean, he's not even Pushkin, the character of Pushkin, he's not even really the villain.
Right.
The villain is this very mischievous, traitorous guy who's going in for his own capitalist needs. Yorgi is. So really, they never really set out saying the actual Russians are the bad guys.
Right.
Because they're being framed for this old assassination, plot. I'm just gonna have to play an audio clip of Shmush Shmishkin. I just cannot say Russian. Shmush Shmishman. But anyway, he even makes fun of it. He's like, that was decommissioned 20 years ago, back in Stalin's day.
Yeah.
So really, it's not really condemning the Russians, because they talk about detente, and it's probably the Bond movie that mentions detente the most. That and Spy Love Me, because Spy Love Me is all about James Bond and a Russian agent named Triple X, go figure, who are having to work together to dealing with the threat of Karl Stromberg. Oh, I always forget the name of the villain from Spy Love Me, but they're having to deal with him, who wants to destroy the world so everyone could live in the sea, to stop polluting the sea. But I digress. So that's a good point. The Russians really aren't the villains. It's really a combination of a defector, defector from Russia, and this crazy wannabe military general type, who's just an arms dealer and a drug dealer. Okay, so you enjoyed, it's a very weird, layered plot. Would you say it was a little too convoluted, or no, you kind of understood it by the end?
Yeah, well, I kind of understood it by the end. Honestly, though, throughout a lot of the plot, I was kind of confused as to what was going on, and I did eventually kind of catch up with it, but I do think, I guess the only thing one thing I could criticize is, even though I've just finished the movie, I'm still not sure exactly what the kind of the trades the trading that was going on at the end, because it's like the Mujahideen want the diamonds and they need the opium so they can sell it for arms from Whitaker. Like, Whitaker wants the opium for arms because it's worth a lot.
Yeah,
and he's gonna sell. He's like gonna sell it stateside or something.
Well, he really just wants the actual money that you would get from the opium.
Yeah,
because he talks about how it's $500 million in opium.
Yeah, but it's like not $500,000, half a billion.
Yeah, $500 million in opium.
And he was saying what, or actually no, I was saying, not the movie, was saying what does the Mujahideen need diamonds for? I'm just kind of thinking, if they're in a war-torn Afghanistan, they would maybe want something of use value rather than diamonds.
They're gonna trade the diamonds for arms and weapons, because he talks about how he wants weapons. Now, of course, if I sound like I know the plot back and forth, there's still some gray areas where I kind of think, wait a minute, is that a plot hole? But I've seen the movie, not hundreds, but I've seen it many times. It's definitely in the double digits, 30, 40 times I've seen this movie.
Sheesh.
I really like Living Daylights. It's one of my favorites. So yeah, I guess going with that plot, well, it's interesting because it goes from dealing with, find out what's up with Yorgi when he gets kidnapped, to, all the shenanigans in Austria. And then that leads to them going to Afghanistan, where Bond's, imprisoned with Kara. And then they escape with the help of who later turns out to be the leader, the Mujahideen, who are involved in this trade with, opium for diamonds. And then that goes to the finale. So yeah, I guess this is an interesting time to bring it up, but I guess we'll bring up the Mujahideen here in a second. But other than the plot, so you did enjoy all the different layers kind of there.
Yeah, although I think one of my favorite parts was the couple of cameos that most of you might have not missed. There's some very famous characters, not really famous in the movie world, but there was some posters of Karl Marx and Vladimir Lenin in the movie, and I was
because they're behind the Iron Curtain.
yeah, but
It's like having a Rocky poster in the kid's bedroom.
I think I'm the only one who gets excited seeing a poster of Marx. I'm just really sad. I'm a dirty commie. No, I'm not so much a fan of Lenin. He kind of sucks. But Marx, I was like, oh look, it's Marx, and that actually is kind of sad in some ways that I react that way. But
no, I think that's fine. You know what can you do? So you know,
I bet you didn't see where I was going with that.
No, I didn't. You're hackling. So I guess my take on the plot would be, you know, it is very complicated, and it's at times some of it's kind of really needlessly complicated. Like they probably could have just took out some of the plot points and kind of, I don't know, maybe with a rewrite it would make a little more narrative sense without losing its complicated layer espionage plot. But, you know, I guess this was kind of a reaction to some of the Roger Moore films. You know, they were just becoming a parody of James Bond almost. Not to the extent of the 60s Casino Royale, but they were becoming parodies.
Mm.
So making this really down and serious and, you know, almost gadgetless movie, except for, you know, there is a couple gadgets, which are actually really cool. So,
even the bad guys had gadgets in this one.
yeah, that's special weaponry. So I guess moving on with some other key points, I guess we can go ahead and start talking about the gadgets. You know, what Bond movie, you know, is without the gadgets? At least by stereotype. So we have his little whistle activated car keys with the alarm. So what did you think of those? Did you enjoy the idea of having a wolf whistle setting off a big explosion?
Yeah, that was a little silly, but I suppose if you're gonna do something, you might as well.
Mm-hmm.
You might as well have that, but.
And then, of course, we have the actual spy car, which I kind of want to just insert a clip of Daffy Duck from Looney Tunes Back in Action, where he's just talking about, ooh, it's going to have the super spy car. This is the best spy car ever. This one, I mean, most of the gadgets are pretty just plain, but it was cool having the spy car in the movie, with lasers and rockets and stuff.
Oh yeah, I like the scene with the laser that cuts the car in half.
Yeah, some of it's almost
whatever.
Borderline silly. That kind of, I don't know. It doesn't really fit the rest of the movie, but I enjoy that scene is there.
Oh, speaking of which, we have to mention the cello sledding scene.
Well, yeah, that's after the car explodes. But getting to the actual car, that does seem like a leftover from the Roger Moore movies. But I think it was kind of teeter-tottering on too goofy, but
yeah,
I don't know.
Well,
it was serious enough. I think it's because of his delivery. Like, oh, I had some optional extras installed, and oh, salt corrosion, and it's oh, okay. Some of those one-liners, like, oh, you clever little.
Yeah. Well, as I was saying, the peak of cheese was definitely the sledding scene because they're
that was
sitting down in a cello case.
Well, that was great because that was the whole back and forth. That was kind of where I set up. But I mean, what did you enjoy the spy car?
I did.
You did? Okay, so I guess going to, there's the whole back and forth with the cello case. It's established early on, like, oh no, we can't go back for your cello. And he's like, oh no, you can't bring your cello. And she's like, I need my cello. And it hard cuts to him in the car, just like, I just
can't believe I'm getting the cello. Sheesh.
I can't believe I'm getting the cello. Why couldn't you play the violin?
And then later on,
he's just like, oh hey, I'm glad I told you to bring that cello. and they're sliding during this chase scene on this the cello case. I think it's probably one of the most inventive Bond chases.
Oh yeah.
And I kind of wish some of the newer movies would take hints of doing stuff similar. I would love to see Daniel Craig on the cello case going down a hill, but maybe that might be a little too goofy for him. So that's always a lot of fun. One little point I was going to go to next is since we've been talking kind of about the action scenes and the gadgets, is I guess let's go ahead and talk the action. I feel like this movie has got some really good set pieces. I mean, some of the editing's kind of off, but it does have, and some of the sight gags are off. But I think most of the action scenes of the movie are really well done. Did you have a favorite of the action set pieces in the movie?
I think, I probably would have to say the part where they're hanging on to the where they're flying outside the airplane. That was a really tense scene.
Yeah, because they're actually hanging on to the big loading dock. They're hanging to the bags. They're hanging on to the bags of opium by the netting, which, that's one thing we wouldn't see in the movies today, I think, is, that's a real effect. I mean, when you see the close-ups of the actors on this beautiful DVD, and I'm sure on the Blu-ray, you can obviously tell that that's just some sort of, like, rocky surface, just sort of some papier-mâché stuff on the bottom. But then when it actually cuts to the stuntmen, I mean, it's a great scene, and I mean, I know they had a lot of safety precautions, but that stunt could have ended really bad with someone flying off. They had, like, parachutes tucked in their shirts and stuff, but I can see that ending really badly. I guess if I had to pick a favorite action scene, I actually have two. I'd say, the actual car chase of the gadget car was really solid. How it kind of, devolved and turned into, oh god, the car is destroyed too, the sliding down with the cello. And ending with them throwing the cello up going, we have nothing to declare except for the cello.
Yeah, that was awesome joke. Probably best joke in the movie.
Oh, I think my second favorite action scene is one that usually doesn't happen in these movies, where you have a very competent supporting character that you only see for like one scene, and then he becomes this badass. Because usually with MI6 and all these movies, you don't really see the underlings act or do any action, which has changed with the Daniel Craig movies. Not to spoil anything about those, but like with Spectre and Skyfall, it's really cool to see some of the other agents actually being spies, like especially Moneypenny, her being an action hero. Seeing Mallory /M, fighting. Well, in this movie, there's a scene where the Austrian hitman is breaking into the safe house where they've got, where they got Yorgi, and he kills one chef, and then he's stopped by this British agent, and you think, oh, well, he'll just kill that British agent, but no, they actually have a very long, tense fight scene. Yeah. Which I don't think they would do in a newer Bond movie, because it's taking away action from Bond. This is a character we don't even know his name, and he's sitting there like fighting with Nikros, and they're hitting each other with frying pans, they're burning themselves, they're cutting themselves with like little saw knives, boiling water, and I mean it's really great. I mean, it's a really great action scene that I just don't think they would put the time and effort into like a little throwaway scene like that in a newer action movie. And it's just very unusual. I think it's a really good action sequence. So going off on that, it's got some good action. The music, I think, was another good thing. It's very 80s-tastic. It's not very cheesy, but it's got a really good synth score. The John Barry music intertwined with variations of the Living Daylights theme song.
A nice 80s beat.
I think it's a really good soundtrack. I think the title song by Aha is good. It's not as good as A View to a Kill, but it's really good. And one thing I noticed with this recent viewing is I never realized that they took the two Pretender songs that were in the movie, If There Was a Man, which is the ending credits music, and Where Has Everyone Gone, which is the music you hear on the little Walkman.
Yeah.
That the assassin has with his killer headphones. And I'm not sure if you picked up on it, but the actual soundtrack actually incorporated the themes of those two pop songs throughout the movie.
I did actually notice that.
Like the like whenever there's like a romantic scene with Kara and Bond, they play the, if there was a man music, like the beautiful melody from it, and then with the action scene with Neros like hanging from the plane, they use the Where's Everyone Gone music, which I think is really cool. So it's kind of like a three-way battle of, which one's gonna have the coolest melody,
Oh yeah.
So I think
that is a little neat trick there.
I mean, I think it's probably one of the best like James Bond soundtracks. Did you really enjoy the music?
I did.
So
yeah, I mean, I think like you combine the, obviously I'm glad they didn't make it like an entirely new wave, like no orchestra, just have only synthesizers or something like that. But I think if you have a healthy mix of those, I think it's good, and I think it fits well for Bond.
So that was really good. So, before we get into some of the bad, I guess going off more on Timothy Dalton, based on just the two books I've read, Casino Royale and Live and Let Die, Timothy Dalton really is the closest. I mean, they don't really talk about the humor much in those two books, but he's got the roughness, he's got the self-loathing, he's got the anger. And I think a lot of people don't give Timothy Dalton the credit of his wide range of emotions. I think the only thing he doesn't handle very well is comedy, because whenever something goofy happens, he makes this face like, ugh, someone farted. Or whenever the birds fly past him or something, like a monkey drops down, he'll be like, ugh. Like he looks really startled. So that's kind of awkward. But I think Timothy Dalton gives a really good performance. And I don't know, he's just a very unique Bond. And he's just very charming, and he can be a complete, badass. He can be a complete bastard in some scenes where he's like manhandling Pushkin's, girlfriend, and when he's manhandling people. So I think, he brings a wide range of emotions, and he's a much more three-dimensioned Bond. Obviously Connery is still, the ideal Bond, but there's a lot more layers and mythos and pathos to, the Dalton's performance. And I think he kind of paved the way in some ways for what I guess Pierce Brosnan tried to do but didn't do, and what Daniel Craig's been doing. I think if there wasn't Timothy Dalton, we probably wouldn't get Daniel Craig as Bond. I know that's kind of a vague
or at least
statement.
The character wouldn't have developed the same way. It's establishing different flavors of Bond, because you have each actor and even their progression through their movies as they grow, in different ways, of course, because Sean Connery grew one way later in the more Bond movies he did, and then Roger Moore kind of evolved in a different way. The more movies he did.
He evolved into more of a clown, which is ironic, because in Octopussy he actually has to disguise himself as a clown. And don't get me wrong, I think Roger Moore is a good actor, but out of all the Bond actors, he's my least favorite. But yeah, that's true. And the thing is, Timothy Dalton he was a better actor than George Lazenby, but both of those actors brought more mythos from the books. Because you have to understand that the Bond of the books and the Bond of the movies are almost two completely different things. Reading Casino Royale and reading Live and Let Die, it's almost jarring with, oh man. So I guess that leads to some of the bad stuff. I do think there is some bad in the movie. The stuff with the Mujahideen is, or Al-Qaeda, the Afghanistan terrorists,
the Taliban.
The Taliban.
Well, it's kind of the same thing with Rambo 3, where it's slightly uncomfortable that it's like, oh, they're against the Russians, and we in the West are against the Russians, or were at that time.
Yeah.
So the enemy of my enemy is my friend, but from a historical perspective, it's like, oh yeah, we Americans are fighting the Taliban, who are basically the Mujahideen of today,
Uh-huh.
we're still fighting them in Afghanistan right now. And so that makes it kind of uncomfortable. But although I will say I think this movie did it better than Rambo 3 in the fact that they didn't actually have a thing at the end saying, hey, this movie is dedicated to all the great freedom fighters of the Mujahideen. Like,
this one handled it better, and plus, I mean, in hindsight, in the movie the way they're depicted isn't bad, but I will say there was one moment that was extremely uncomfortable at the end of the movie when they come rushing in to Kara's performance, and they're like, "Oh, sorry, we're late. We had trouble at the airport," and I'm just like, "Oh,"
and the guy's like, "Oh."
I
really?
imagine.
No one's expecting that. He made a joke. I can't remember what it was. But...
I can't imagine why. But yeah, in hindsight, that could be really bad taste if that was made today. But this was made pre 9/11. But still, just the fact that they come barging in, they're like, "Yeah, we had trouble at the airport." I'm like, "Oh." It was kind of cringeworthy and kind of made me a little nauseous.
Oops.
But so that's not really something bad. It's just in hindsight, it's just kind of really awkward. I will say that I don't know. Maybe the movie would have been better if I don't know. I feel like the movie is kind of flawed in some ways. I mean, I really do enjoy it, but I've always preferred License to Kill more because that's a way more. It's just a more condensed and streamlined just movie. It's very basic. It's just a revenge plot.
And it has a better name.
Yeah, it was originally supposed to be called License Revoked, but apparently a lot of people didn't understand that, so they turned it to License to Kill. Which is ironic, because in that movie he's rogue, so he doesn't really have his license to kill, but I digress. But, I guess I feel like the movie is kind of a little plot heavy, and depending on your mood, it's either a very intriguing spy movie that kind of feels like a spy novel with lots of subplots, but I don't know, it feels like they could have developed things more. Maybe give Pushkin more to do, give John Rhys-Davies more to do, but I really don't have a lot that I don't enjoy about it. It's just more some of the sight gags. Like, I think the fight in the jail is really awkward and poorly staged, but I'm just kind of grasping at straws. But
yeah,
was there anything
not a whole
you
lot.
disenjoyed?
Disenjoyed.
You disenjoyed it?
Yeah, no, there really wasn't a whole lot bad at all. I think overall this was a good movie. I'm glad that I watched it. I think, I don't know, like, I know we want to make this particular section really, really long, but really there's really not all that much bad, so I don't know, I guess.
Yeah.
I guess it's good time to sign off here for today, huh?
I guess. So yeah, that's kind of the thing. It's like, I think in hindsight, it's a very, it's a very serious Bond movie, but it's not afraid to have some laughs. And looking back at it, it kind of did pave the way for kind of how some of the newer Bond movies are. Maybe I'm the only one who's making this comparison, but I feel this is, it's got one of those complicated, multiple layer plots. So
yeah.
But I really enjoy it, and I might be the only person who says Timothy Dalton's my favorite Bond, but I think for having two very interesting movies that are a lot of fun that I constantly go back to, that's enough of a recommendation.
Yeah,
so,
he was definitely good.
Well, I guess going ahead, we'll kind of wrap this puppy up a little bit. I definitely recommend checking out License to Kill. It's definitely up there with some of the better Bond movies. I guess your enjoyment might vary with Timothy Dalton, but I think he's quite good. Well, anyway, signing off. You can find us at Apologize the Podcast on Facebook, and also on Podomatic at Apologize the Podcast at Podomatic.com. Find us on YouTube on the channel Jowlman22, where I'll be posting all the episodes. You can comment, like,
and
subscribe. Yeah, there you go. If you want to say my voice sounds funny, go for it. If you want to send angry hate mail, go for it. If you want to send compliments, hey, and money, hey, I take money too. But anyway,
send us opium.
No, not the opium. Anyway, so I guess signing off, we'll just say apologize to the podcast.
Apologize to the podcast.
Hello, and welcome to a commercial for Hello, This is the Doom Show. I'm Richard.
I'm Brad.
And on the podcast that is known as Hello, This is the Doom Show, we talk about giallo movies, slasher movies, horror movies.
We're going to interview Cary Grant live in the studio.
We're going to interview Lucio Fulci in the studio, folks. We're going to put Cary Grant in the studio with Lucio Fulci. It's the interview you never thought would happen.
I'm going to wear my Vincent Price slacks.
I'm going to wear my Citizen Kane wristwatch and monocle. And now Brad is going to recite the Pledge of Allegiance in Portuguese. Brad, go.
I don't know Portuguese.
Go! Go!
Stop hitting me!
You're a natural actor.
Yeah.
You can listen to us at hellodoomedshow.podomatic.com, or you can find the archive at doomedmoviethon.com.